So, for instance, we have that by the 10th century in Cordoba, for instance, the Gospels were being translated into Arabic, and the Psalms were also being translated
into Arabic.
Yes, because Christians were losing Latin.
For some Christians, this inexorable Arabization was a cause of deep dismay. By 850, some Cordoban Christians could take it no more.
Take the case of Isaac, who turned up one day at the office of the Qadi, the local religious chief, and announced that he wanted to become a Muslim. The Qadi instructed Isaac in Islam, at which point Isaac flabbergasts the Qadi by insulting Muhammad and abusing Islam. The Qadi, of course, strikes Isaac. Isaac then says, "How dare you strike a face that resembles the image of God?" Qadi gives him one last chance. He says, "Are you drunk? Are you having a particularly bad day? Is something going wrong at home? Is there anything I can do?" And Isaac says, no, no, no. He's absolutely determined to die for Christianity, which, of course, he duly does.
In a 9-year period, 47 further Christian martyrs followed Isaac's lead.
We interpret this movement of the so-called voluntary martyrs as a movement of frustration on people who were losing their social power at that time here in Cordoba, because the rate of conversion was so high that these people just couldn't stand the idea that Christianity was becoming a minority religion. So it was a kind of desperate movement in desperate circumstances.
Now, there's no real analogy between the Cordoba martyrs and the Muslim suicide bombers of today. The Christians didn't set out to kill innocent people, but the two groups are alike in at least one respect.
I think the kind of spectacular terrorism we are seeing of this Islamic world is, in my interpretation, very much a product of a sense of desperation rather than of self-confidence, that all other means have been used and there is nothing left except this kind of destructive, spectacular terrorism.
In the history of Spain, religious communities have taken it in turn to suffer despair. First, the Christians experienced the erosion of their religious and cultural identity and responded with fanatical protest. And then it was the turn of the Jews and the Muslims, expelled in the 1600s. And under the Catholic monarchs and General Franco, it was the Muslim contribution that was airbrushed out of history, and Catholicism became a state-sponsored religion.
I was born in a generation under Franco regime where everybody was forced to be Catholic, where any other religion different than Catholicism was forbidden. And even you could go into prison if you have any outward manifestation of any other religion.
Even today, when Spain's Muslim heritage generates so many millions of tourist dollars, you can detect a certain local sniffiness about our Moorish obsessions. "Don't forget the Visigoths," they cry, and they point to the few defaced lumps that remain from the era of the Christian barbarians, as though the 900-year Arab presence was a kind of aberration.
Las cúpulas. Por ejemplo, los mosaicos todo se trajeron a los mejores orfebres bizantinos pagados para que le hicieran esos trabajos. Luego de innovación árabe, nada de nada, sino dinero y pagar los mejores que había en aquel momento en el mundo.
¿Qué crees de la herencia musulmana aquí?
Claro, pero fueron copiando muchos de los romanos.
Muchos de los romanos. Los musulmanes.
Los romanos tuvieron antes que los árabes aquí en Andalucía.
Sí, sí. You think much of the culture is Islamic?
No.
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 No, no, no.
No.
It derives from the ancient Visigoth, from the ancient Christian culture.
Here the Visigoths and in the north the Celtic, pienso que quizás se le da demasiada importancia, sobre todo en este momento y en este siglo,
a la prominencia de la cultura islámica. Ha existido, ha tenido muchas cosas importantes y aquí está, pero es una más, como nos podrá pasar a lo mejor dentro de 2 siglos con la multiculturalidad.
The sheer ignorance that exists in this country about Islam and about the Islamic past, I mean, that's a pity. And it's surprising to which extent people ignore the richness of the Islamic civilization in this country. People want to somehow stress this Visigothic heritage, but obviously the Visigothic heritage is, I mean, it's
pretty difficult to work out what it is.
It's difficult to work it out, yeah.
Many people are proud of the Moorish past, but that's not to say they look forward to a Moorish future.
We made the difference, no we, but people in general, made this difference that the Alhambra was made for another Moorish people, but not this Moorish people.
Not the Moroccans who come and live in modern Granada.
The ones, and maybe they have kind of problem with these people. It's a question of patriotism. People who think like Spain is like my nation,
country.
yeah, my
Corazon.
country, yeah, and they want like very white and perfect people. They don't want no Muslim or not anyone to come here, but maybe it's a half of Spain thinks that it's all right, and the other half of Spain is like afraid of this. Maybe they're just scared.
The Spanish are of course not alone in suffering from the odd bout of racism or xenophobia. But if you put the Spanish nation on the psychoanalyst's couch, it's easy to see how history has conditioned their subconscious. It is a history of bloody battles between Moor and Christian. The Christian kings in the north were increasingly warlike, and their determination to repel the invader was fueled by an increasingly religious fervor, which made life tricky for the Christians still in Moorish territory in Al-Andalus.
Even though legally speaking they had the same status as Jews, they were never considered the same as Jews because they were a fifth column.
They were a military threat.
They could be in contact, they could be spies, they could be seen as spies or people who would have alliances with the Christians of the north.
And yet it wasn't the Christians who destroyed this palace of flowers, Madinat al-Zahra, in 1010. It was Muslim Berber tribesmen. And this Muslim civil war gave the Christians their chance. After centuries on the back foot, Christians were advancing in Spain. Sicily had been recaptured for the cross, and now Christian eyes were turning east as they contemplated a grandiose plan of reconquest, the Crusades.
Now, it would be fair to say that in the West these days, the word crusade does not carry its full weight as an unrelenting military operation actuated by specifically Christian fervour. For instance, the other day I heard a colleague of mine call for a crusade to ensure that rubbish skips were installed with flashing lights as well as reflective signs. And I can't imagine that 1,000 swords are going to leap from their scabbard to fight for that one. And yet when George Bush called for a crusade after 9/11, he started a global panic because he seemed to be alluding backwards to an epoch in which Christians fought Muslims and Muslims fought Christians for the sake of religion, and sometimes for the sake of religion alone.
It began in 1095 with the most bellicose Christian sermon of all time. Pope Urban II appeared before a vast crowd in Clermont, France, and called for an armed pilgrimage against the Muslims in the Holy Land, the place the Muslims had conquered 400 years earlier. And you may wonder how Western Europe plucked up the courage to challenge Muslim supremacy.
On the face of it, we've got a mystery. For centuries, the Arab world has been firing on all cylinders. They've been charting the heavens and investigating the circulation of the blood and cracking complicated algebraic equations. And they've been full of intellectual and military confidence, while Western Europe has been sunk in lethargy, a world of stumbling ox carts and mumbling monks and homicidal popes. And yet it's Western Christendom that manages to shake itself out of its lethargy and mount these extraordinary expeditions.